All right, today we have the impact of divorce on adolescents by Hannah Erdman, Anna Hendrickson, and Marvel Olson. And for the introduction, nearly half of marriages end in divorce and half of divorces involve children under 18 years old. Divorce is difficult for all involved and especially affects children. They can feel that they are to blame. They may want to fix the problem. They're affected emotionally and academically, and this reduces the cognitive and educational performance. Children are also affected occupationally as they get older, and the children of divorce have more behavioral problems.
So some of the statistics that we found in 2019, 746,971 divorces and annulments were reported out of 2,015,603 marriages that had occurred. According to the CDC reports from 2000 to 2019, marriages rates went from 8.2 per 1,000 people with a divorce rate of 4.0 per 1,000 people in 2000, and compared to the marriage rate of 6.1 per 1,000 total population and a divorce rate of 2.7 per 1,000 in 2019. So it shows a decrease in marriages over the 19 years and a decrease in divorces as well. Within 19 years recorded by the CDC, there have been approximately 17 million total divorces or annulments in the United States. And in 2001, there were a total of 72.5 million children under the age of 18 living in households. And of that 72.5 million, there was 18.5 million children that were living with one of their unmarried parents, so in a single household.
All right, so the first article we looked at was called Psychosocial Wellbeing and the Relationship Between Divorce and Children's Academic Achievement. Their research question stated, is divorce associated with psychosocial well-being? And does psychosocial well-being impact academic performance? For their method, they used data from the Early Childhood Longitudinal Study. They measured math and reading scores using a student assessment, psychosocial well-being through teacher and parent reports. And they also included some measures in order to isolate the impact of psychosocial well-being. They used economic resources such as income and number of books in the home, parenting practices, parental conflict, and parent-child relationship using questionnaires. Their key results showed that children with divorced parents had lower reading and math scores. They also had lower levels of psychosocial well-being. And it's also showed that divorce was associated with lower psychosocial well-being, which in turn explained the lower levels of academic performance. For the next article called The Impact of Parental Separation or Divorce on Performance in Preterm Children, a Population-Based Study. Their purpose was to quantify the decrease in school performance associated with the divorce in preterm children and whether this effect was different depending on the age of the child at the separation. Their method included preterm babies born less than 35 weeks gestation, and they measured parental separation depending on the age of the child in months at the divorce. They used a global school adaptation scale, which is a teacher-reported behavior scale. They also measured some adjustment variables such as gestational age, birth weight, gender, and twinship, which is used to match the children to create a control group. The key results showed that children with divorced parents between ages 3 and 5 had lower school performance, decreased ability to pay attention in classes, less engagement, and less independence. This effect was only found for children whose the divorce had occurred between 3 and 5 years of age. And the conclusion for this article is that parental divorce can impact children as young as 3 years old, and that divorce can have negative impacts on academics.
For the third article was a mediation and moderation of divorce effects on children's behavior. They had two hypotheses. On average, children from divorced families would display more externalizing and internalizing behavior issues than children from intact families, and the other one being child and family characteristics will act as protective factors moderating the effects of divorce. The method, they used 1,364 mothers from 10 different areas and hospitals is where they gathered their participants. And then they interviewed the mothers and the children starting at 1 month old and went up to 15 years of age. So they measured the adjustment to parental divorce, whether the parents, depending on what time the parents got a divorce throughout the child's growth period of adolescence. They also measured IQ scores, externalizing and internalizing behaviors. And the key results of this study was that high IQ scores were buffers for adolescents' internalizing behavior. If children had come from families with fewer economic resources, they were more likely to exhibit externalizing behavior problems. Mother's pre-divorce sensitivity was a buffer for the child's externalizing behavior problems. So the mother's pre-divorce kind of determined whether or not child's externalizing behaviors would be more of an issue or not. The home's environment was a strong mediator of internalizing problems, as children were more likely to develop anxiety, withdrawal behavior, and depression due to chaos in the home. So the home environment had a huge role in behavior issues as well. And the overall conclusions were there are buffers that can alleviate some of the impacts of divorce, such as pre-divorce sensitivity and home environment. And then, as again, like I said, home environment had a large influence on positive or negative behaviors.
Okay, the fourth article was entitled Enhancing Youth Outcomes Following Parental Divorce, a longitudinal study of the effects of divorce of the New Beginnings program on educational and occupational goals. The problem they discussed was a divorce can lead to a lower educational, occupational, and decreased socioeconomic status. The purpose was to examine the New Beginnings program for divorced families to see if it led to improvements in youth's education and job aspiration 6 years following participation. It also measured whether the youth variables mediated program effects. The method was a randomized experimental trial of 240 families, and the children were 9 to 12 years old when it began. They evaluated post-divorce interventions, and this included 5 interviews, including the 6-year follow-up. They measured the demographics, mother-child relationship quality, effective discipline, externalizing behaviors, internalizing problems, self-esteem, academic competence, and educational and occupational outcomes. The important difference from the other trials is that it's considered the effects on adulthood. And the results were the key finding results were children of divorce are at an increased risk for academic and occupational achievements. And also parenting skills can greatly affect these outcomes, and the public health issue due to divorce can be reduced through parenting interventions. Conclusions is that are that improving parenting skills can improve the child outcomes. Children with protective factors such as higher self-esteem, academic competence, externalizing problems, internalizing problems, and mother-child relationships do better educationally and occupationally. And the intervention-induced effects, so then also the improving academic and occupational outcomes will lessen the public health burden by the widespread implementation of parenting-focused preventative interventions for at-risk population.
So we also looked at what has already been done to help combat the negative effects of divorce, and specifically in the state of Wisconsin, before you can officially file for divorce and have your paperwork signed, all parents have to go through a prerequisite parenting class. So before that, they have the final court date for their divorce. They have to go through a certain amount of hours for the parenting class, depending on the situation of the divorce, and as well as the custody amounts that are going to happen. So Wisconsin and other states do require, but specifically Wisconsin requires a pre-divorce parenting class to ensure that parenting styles are still in the forefront of the adults in the divorce, as well as trying to mediate the parenting style so they're not too different from when they were before the divorce. And in addition, there was intervention programs for children of divorce. So this is where children would have 12 to 15 programs in their school, and it would be aimed towards the child's age, as well as just coping mechanisms to deal with divorce and a better understanding of what divorce means for the child. So that intervention program is more specifically just to the children. And then there's also a kid share program that is a neutral ground for parents. So this is where parents can meet up and swap children. So if it's 50-50 custody, then they have to meet up in a supervised area that'll be healthy for the children as well, where they can have visitations, or where they can meet up to exchange the kids for whatever time period. And it also offers counseling for the family as well as parents or children.
Sorry about that. We also talked about some possible solutions. One of our solutions was increasing maternal sensitivity. One of our articles talked about how increasing maternal sensitivity can be a protective factor for decreasing internalizing and externalizing behavioral problems. So we believe that implementing parenting classes, such as teaching parents how to talk with their children, how to have good listening skills, and how to give supportive and constructive feedback, can be helpful. Another possible solution is increasing psychosocial well-being. One of the articles talked about how divorce can cause lower psychosocial well-being, which can impact their academic performance. So we think that classes for children, such as teaching them how to interact with others, how to find a support system, and how to have basic self-love, can help with this also. Another one of our articles talked about how divorce can cause decreased attention ability, engagement, independence, and manual dexterity. One thing we talked about was after-school programs that can be implemented to help kids with communication skills, which can increase self-confidence and engagement in classes. Also having crafts and activities at these can help to increase manual dexterity. We also talked about how medical interventions is important for kids with attention disabilities. Testing for ADHD and ADD can help to get the child treatment.
Sorry. We also have resources for parents, so like economic resources to help with the financial burden that may come from divorce, resources for children such as school counselors, social workers, and therapy, just because this can be a hard time where children might not know who to trust anymore. So having that school counselor, social worker, just have another third-party person they can trust, reduce stress on families. So this could also be through more therapy in the family, or just making sure that through parenting classes or those exchange programs that there's less stress and tension when they do all see each other. Improve children's self-esteem. So this would build resilience and increase likelihood of achieving academic success, and then increases in likelihood of occupational success, which leads to increases in socioeconomic economic success. In addition, we also have improving parental interactions. So no parent should speak negatively of the other, and they should also try and stabilize the parenting styles. So attempt to both stay the same in both households, as well as try not to shift too much if it doesn't need to be shifted after the divorce. So just having that stability with parenting styles, so it's not too much of a lifestyle change for the kids.
So the conclusions, all involved can survive divorce, resiliency can be created, education can increase positive outcomes for both children and family. Divorce does affect the children's academics, and divorce affects the children's psychosocial well-being as well. So parents can mitigate the effects of divorce by being there for their children, paying attention to the child's needs, being sensitive, communicating with their children, taking care of themselves as well. By doing that, they will decrease the stress and allow themselves to be better parents. And also to know that children may internalize and externalize behaviors. Divorce can cause lower self-esteem, and children can be negatively affected by divorce even as early as 3 years old. And children who are more intelligent are able to understand divorce easier. So it's good things to keep in mind. And yeah.
All right, here are our references, and that is it.